morning and welcome to Morning Java. I'm Dale Lally here with Mike Kovac, our Pitt writer here at DKPittsburghSports.com. This, of course, always brought to you by our friends at the Get Go Cafe and Market, where you can get curbside service, Mike. They'll bring it right out to your car. You order on your phone, and you don't even have to go inside. It's a perfect thing.
I love curbside service, Dale. I love food, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the speaking of eating, the Pitt basketball program doing a little heavy eating here in the recruiting season with getting Nikesub, a transfer from Miami of Ohio.
Miami of Ohio, Dale.
Miami of Ohio, the same school that produced
Ben Roethlisberger.
So this is a kid that produced in the MAC and played quite well in the MAC. I know some people were questioning, if his game will transfer over to the ACC. I've watched the highlights of the kid. He's an athlete.
Absolutely. The MAC is a one-bid league, and it has been for a long time. So I understand some of those questions. It makes a lot of sense. But the kid was the MAC Freshman of the Year a few years ago. He's been a consistent scorer. We're talking consistently around 15 points a game, explosive, big hops, can hit the three. This was quite a gift,
Mike. I watch a guy's shooting stroke, and I can tell if he's a shooter or not. That kid's a shooter. I saw some step back stuff and the ability to get to the basket. You could watch like Trey McGowan's and guys like that shooting, and it just wasn't natural for him. This guy's a natural shooter.
Yeah, and that's key. Clearly I thought their biggest weakness last year was perimeter shooting. Ryan Murphy was supposed to bring it, and after he had the concussion, he was a shell of his former self. Gerald Drumgoole, they brought him in last year thinking he was going to solidify the perimeter game for them, and he really struggled. He also had an injury early in the year and just never really seemed to be to get over that, to get back on track after that. I think it took him, until like February to make his first three-pointer of the season, and that clearly wasn't what they were anticipating. But this kid, if he is eligible, if he gets that waiver and can play this upcoming season, it's a huge get for Pitt. I mean, you're talking they recruited Alabama and some big time schools to get this guy. He didn't even list Pitt as one of his 5 finalists when he was going to transfer. So Capel really pulled this one out, and just much needed backcourt depth. And now if he can play, you've got 4 guys in the backcourt that can bring minutes and bring quality to you, and it makes such a difference. It's something they haven't had in years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you watched Pitt the last few years, the depth was lacking, and so guys had to play way too many minutes, way more than they probably deserved in some cases, where they should be, playing 10, 12 minutes a game. All of a sudden they're playing 35. And so, that's going to wear you down by the end of the season, and it's going to wear you down in terms of you're just not going to win many games that way. At least now, maybe they have a little bit of that depth and quality depth, not just, bringing guys off the bench to steal a couple minutes here or there, guys that they can bring in and who can, give you some scoring touch off the bench. And again, if the guy's that athletic, he should be able to do some things for you defensively as well, rebounding, those kind of things.
Exactly. He's gonna find some playing time regardless, whether it's as a starter or in a backup role. But I really think, bringing him in here, they're probably thinking, A, he's going to be eligible for the 2021 season, and B, there's a good chance, he's going to, if he's not going to start, he's going to be primary backup, possibly at both guard positions. You do have Ithiel Horton coming in, the transfer from Delaware, could be the 2 guard. You still have Xavier Johnson, point guard. This is the thing, with Capel. He said he was going to recruit hard and recruit big, and you're seeing that paying off now with, you got the 5 guys coming in as freshmen. Was the number, I think, 14 class in the country by some recruiting services. Others had it, down around 20. Either way,
a top 25 class.
Yeah, you look at what Kevin Stallings was doing a few years ago, and there's only, I think, 1 player left from that team. When you think about it, that's pretty wild turnover. When Terrell Brown, I'm pretty certain, is the only guy remaining from that.
Mike, earlier this week, you talked to Pitt's outstanding freshman from last season, Justin Champagny, and he had some interesting things to say to you about his future in the program.
Yeah, you know what? I really enjoyed my talk with him. He just you'd ask him something and he wasn't afraid to answer, which is pretty refreshing, especially coming from a college kid. He told me when they were going to be back on campus before Pitt told us. He probably got yelled at for that, but he told
Probably.
me anyway.
Yeah.
um, and he said, he told me, he goes, I don't want to jinx myself, but which means he is thinking after this year, if he has a similar type of season or gets better, he's probably thinking about what's my NBA stock.
Sure.
And yeah, and how can you not? If the NBA comes calling for you, you answer. And, he's got good size. He can rebound. He's got the hops. He's got the touch. And, he's got a lot of toughness to his game. He was Pitt's most complete player last year. He was Pitt's best player last year. And, definitely, I thought it was interesting saying that he was definitely looking toward a pro career. It's his goal. It's his dream. But he also seemed very adamant. He wants Pitt in the NCAA tournament this season. And it's, get there or bust. And if they don't get there, he sounds like he's going to be one disappointed guy.
Yeah, I know. I was reading through your story, and some of the comments were like, "Oh, it would be awful if they lost this guy." If he goes to the NBA, that means he's probably one of the top 30 small forwards / shooting guards in the country.
Yep.
That would be the only way that he would enter the draft. If he's that, Pitt probably is in the tournament next year.
Exactly. And if he goes to the NBA, do you think a guy like Capel can't use that as a recruiting tool? I mean, what Capel's
This
shown
guy was a 3-star recruit. We had him in the NBA in 2 years.
he was, Pitt brought in 3 freshmen last year. Champagne, they brought in Abdul Karim Koulibaly, who I talked to earlier today. And, they brought in Gerald Drumgold, who we mentioned in the last segment. And Champagne was the lowest rated guy out of the 3. I think he was number 247 in the country. You tell me there was 246 better freshmen in college basketball last year. I don't know if there was 15 better freshmen in college basketball.
Well, the ACC coaches apparently thought so because they didn't vote to the all freshman team. But there's some good old boy politics that happen with that kind of stuff too.
Well, and Pitt's still kind of a new kid to the ACC, and you have to prove yourself, and they haven't done a lot of winning there. But he clearly maybe deserved a little bit of mention of that team, and I think you're going to see a big season for him. And like you said, if Pitt makes a tournament, he's got to have his name all over it.
Mike, you wrote a story earlier this week on the Pitt defensive line, and assuming that there is football this year, college football in particular. It looks like one of the top lines in not just in the ACC, but in the entire NCAA. I mean, they've got a guy who's a potential number 1 overall draft pick. They've got another guy that teams are looking at. It's being talked about as probably a 3rd, 4th, 5th round draft pick. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you see out of the Clemsons and Alabamas and schools like that. Not Pitt, but that's what they've got right now.
They have quality and depth, Dale. I mean, they have a lot going on up front right now. I saw multiple things this past week that actually had the Pitt defensive line ranked as the best unit in the country going into the season. A lot's going to go into that. It does help that you're in the ACC Coastal, obviously. Although when you look at it, Sam Howell, quarterback at North Carolina, Hendon Hooker at Virginia Tech. There's the Coastal's getting a little better offensively, possibly, than it's been the last couple of years. But you look at that line, I mean, Jalen Twyman in the middle. You mentioned, a guy that's got looks like a first-round pedigree, strong with good moves and quickness inside, and just seems to do what he wants, especially against the pass. Pretty good against the run. On the edge, you got Patrick Jones, just a freak athlete. Long arms and uses them well, lots of strip sacks, lots of pressure on the quarterback. I think he led the ACC in quarterback pressures last year. You got Rashad Weaver coming back on the other end. You've got Keyshawn Camp coming back in the middle. Deslin Alexander started all 13 games last year, and everybody's talking about him like he's a guaranteed backup right now. You got Baldonado. A couple of years ago, I was in Rome with my wife on our 10th anniversary, and I walked into the famous Steelers bar in Rome, and they have all kinds of decorations from Pennsylvania and colleges and Steelers gear and all kinds of stuff. And the guy who owns the bar, we started talking and found out he's a Penn State fan and how he became a Steelers fan, all this stuff. But one of the questions he asked me was, he started asking me about Baldonado. And I said, well, he hasn't played really yet, but he did play last year, and he showed a ton of promise last year. I mean, he was all over the field when he was in there. I think he had 5.5 quarterback sacks. This line, it's just so deep and so good that if there are a couple injuries, there are guys in there that the level of play is not going to drop. And I think that's why a lot of people are so bullish on this defense right now. You got a defensive line like that, Dale, and covering the Steelers. When you get good pressure up front, boy, it makes things easier for the guys in the back.
It sure does. And I know Pitt's secondary, the starters are okay. They don't have a ton of depth there, but certainly if you have the front, the front guys, the front seven to get after the quarterback and maybe even shut down the run and do those things, makes everything else easier. Pat Narduzzi's done a great job of building that part of that football team. We'll see if they can generate enough offense this year to complement that. I like Mark Whipple as an offensive coordinator. I've known him for a number of years, back from his days with the Steelers. And so, I mean, it's a shame that, perhaps we heard Heather Lyke talking earlier this week that, maybe they only play their ACC schedule this year. Maybe they don't play any of the non-conference games, which would eliminate a game against Notre Dame, eliminate a game against Marshall, and I'm trying to think of who the other one was. But
Miami, Ohio.
Yeah, you'd like to see these games get played because this looks like a pretty good football team.
It looks like a really good football team, and you mentioned that with all the headlines going around Clemson and LSU and Kansas State. College football right now, you sit there and look at it and you kind of go, are they going to get it figured out? Because you can't really do a bubble with college football teams. You can't.
I mean, these are still student athletes, and they have to go to class and do those kind of things. The one thing I will say that even though the numbers are spiking in terms of the COVID numbers, the deaths are way down.
Mm-hmm.
The people who are being infected now are the younger people, and we're not seeing the death rates that we saw with, of course, the older population earlier in this whole pandemic.
Yeah, and a lot of asymptomatic cases too, obviously. But you do sit there and think if somehow something crazy happens and there is no college football, the ramifications from that are just insane. I mean, you're probably looking at colleges. Some will close. Others, will be dropping programs. It'll be huge. And then if they do play it, say in the spring, if you're a guy like Jalen Twyman or Patrick Jones, is it worth playing? Yeah. Right.
Right.
So all those guys that are thinking about the NFL, Paris Ford, I don't think I'm going to play this spring. I'm good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, it would touch programs like Clemson too. I mean, does their quarterback play if it comes right down to it? I mean, the money is calling, and that draft is not going to. It's going to be so soon after. If they play in the spring and you suffer an injury, you may go undrafted, and that's that's just too tough to do. I mean, those kids just won't play.
Yeah. There's really so much to be settled here in the upcoming days and weeks, but. Like we touched on, there's just so much on the line financially for these schools that they're obviously going to do everything they can, I think, to have a season and have it in the fall.